فضلا وليس أمرا ادعمونا بلايك للفيديو واشتراك بالقناة.
Hello and welcome to my new video, how to draw a hole, a 3D city illusion. For this drawing I used an A4 piece of paper on which I drew a grid of squares with a pencil. I did this so that I could erase some of the squares later on and get back to the white paper. And so the first step in this drawing is to draw a cross at the intersection of some of the squares towards the bottom right hand corner of your piece of paper. This will be useful later on. After you've done this little cross, we just need to draw a sort of zigzaggy shape, which will be the hole in the paper. I think it is probably best if the shape is quite zigzaggy, so that when we turn it into an anamorphic 3D illusion, there are lots of edges in which we can find ways to make it look like it's a deep hole. So to have a line going backwards and forwards would be really good. And so the next step would be to draw some squares, but have them at a different angle to the squares, the grid squares that I drew at the beginning when it was just a blank piece of paper. So it would be good if all these squares were parallel to each other, all going in the same direction. And these squares are going to be the tops of the buildings, so they don't need to be square, they could be various rectangles or even other shapes. But just for simplicity, I've just made them squares on the whole. Some of them should be smaller and some of them should be bigger, so that you can have a variety of different buildings coming out of the hole. For this drawing, I've made sure that several of the squares are overlapping the zigzag shape of the hole. That will be really useful to create the illusion. And also some of the squares are perhaps more smaller in the centre of the hole. And so at the moment the drawing is basically a series of flat shapes, and now we're going to try and make it into a more three-dimensional image by drawing from the corners of the squares that we've just drawn a line towards the little cross that we did at the bottom right hand corner of the page. Now this line will need to stop as it gets to the edge of the zigzag line, but for all of the squares that you've just drawn, if you draw a line from their corners towards this one point, then as an anamorphic drawing, once we view the drawing at the end, from the direction of the point of the cross, all of the buildings that we're making the squares into should seem much more three-dimensional than they would in a normal drawing. And so at this stage you just need to use an eraser to tidy up some of the lines that we'll no longer need in the centre of your drawing. And so the next step is just to make sure that the zigzag sort of hole that we drew at the beginning is a useful shape for the drawing that you have at this stage. I think it's always a good idea just to imagine that you can correct or make better the drawing that you had at the beginning. It's always good just to have that in mind. And so once you're satisfied that the shapes are the shapes that you need, then we'll add some more lines going towards the cross on the bottom right hand corner of the page. And then we need to find out where the base of the buildings are. And you just need to do that by judging where one of the buildings stops, and then making sure that all the other buildings stop at the same point at the bottom. And so at this stage I just use an eraser as you go along just to tidy up the drawing so that it becomes really quite simple. You want it as simple as you can possibly make it, but the lines sort of going the right way. The base of all the buildings I could just do as a very small, like snake-like little path or roadway system at the bottom of that, and I think that will help later on in creating the illusion of depth. At this stage you might want to just add a few other buildings to your drawing. If there's space for them, why not? And now the next stage, I guess, is to make some of the buildings a bit taller, and to do that it will be exactly the same process, but this time we'll start by drawing on top of some of the skyscrapers a square, and then transferring the line from the cross in the bottom right hand corner of the page up from that square to create a wedge-shaped cube, and that will be the top part of the taller buildings. And so we've got all the basic shapes that we need for this illusion, and now we can just add some floors to the buildings and some lines to them. Now all the vertical lines are going to go towards the cross, and all the horizontal lines, as it were, which are the same direction as the top of the building, will be parallel to the top of the building. And as any of these lines get towards the cross, they're going to get even nearer to each other or closer together. And that will create a tunnelling sort of effect, which will be very helpful for your drawing. After this, what I would suggest is to use a thin black pen and go over all of the lines with a thin black pen. There are lots of different types of black pens, and when you're used to using a pencil, it has a certain thickness to the line, so you don't want to use a black pen which is suddenly quite a bit thicker than the pencil that you're using. It would be better to use a pen that's similar thickness to the pencil, otherwise you'll find that you can't really go over your lines because the pen is too thick. Once you have completed that, you'll have a nice drawing with all of the basic shapes, but it'll just be a pen line. And for this effect to work well, it needs some tone or shading in it. And for this drawing, I'm going to use some marker pens, which have got various grades of grey, and they are quite good because they blend very well. And when they dry, they're quite wet pens, and when they dry pretty flat, which is useful. If you haven't got marker pens, you could use a pencil and just grade it with a pencil really carefully, going from dark to light or light to dark, and that would work really well too. This drawing took me just under an hour to do, and obviously for this video I speeded up various parts of it, but I tried to include all the main things that I discovered as I was drawing the image, so that you could have a go too. I hope you find this drawing useful, and I hope you subscribe to Circle Line Art School for many more art videos. I post a new video each week, and there are now over 140 videos, I think. There are quite a few optical illusions, so if you want to click on the link below, you'll be able to see the playlist of all the optical illusions that I've drawn. If you like this video as well, if you could give it a thumbs up, that would be great, and share it or make a comment. Thank you very much, and see you next time. Bye-bye.